Caesar 4.28.1 starts out with a lovely ablative absolute right here. All right, here's the ablative, here's the ablative. This is a perfect passive participle, or PPP, and that's down here, confirmo, to establish. So that modifies PACE in case, ablative, number, singular, and gender, feminine. Lovely. And this, actually, I'm surprised he didn't make a little bracket here, because this is the ablative of means with the PPP. When you see a passive verb form, look for the ablative, right? And there it is, right there. Peace having been, what did I say, established by these things. And by these things, of course, this is looking back at all that stuff we talked about before, that giving of the hostages and such. So that's what he's referring to there, and it goes inside the ablative absolute. I'll mark that, ablative absolute. Absolutely. Now this expression is really tough. After the fourth day. Seems really straightforward, but it's after the fourth day then, and this wentum goes here, actually. Wentum est. This is impersonal passive. Wentum est means they arrived, he arrived, she arrived. Not quite sure. It's just a shorthand for Romans to state the action. So really what this comes out meaning is 4 days after they arrived in Britain. And who's they? Why, it's the ships. And how many are there? 18 of them. 10 plus 5 plus 1, 2, 3. 18 ships. 4 days after the 18 ships arrived in Britain. The ships about which, okay, this relative pronoun is referring back to naves as its antecedent. You can see plural, plural, feminine, feminine. Okay. Naves is nominative, but quibus is ablative because the relative pronoun does not agree with its antecedent in case. Its case depends on its function. In its own clause, it is the object of day. A little prepositional phrase there, about which it was stated clearly above. So that's Caesar's way of saying, which I talked about previously. Hard to translate that because, again, impersonal passive. These are always perfect. Demonstratum est, wentum est. It was shown. So there's no particular subject to that. It's just a verbal idea. Hard to translate. Those ships. And then, look at this. This relative pronoun also refers back to the ships. Nominative, this is plural, plural, feminine, feminine, perfect. The relative pronoun agrees with its antecedent in number and gender. So its case happens to be nominative. It is the subject, big S, of this relative clause, and there's the big V there. The ships which had brought the cavalry. Ex superiore portu, leni vento solverunt. Here's the main verb here. They set sail from the further port on a light wind. That's the ablative of means, carrying them along. And so main verb there. And everything else, we've got ablative absolute. We've got this subordinate clause here, and subordinate clause here, relative clause here, And finally, the main verb at the very bottom. I did want to talk a little bit about Sustulaurant. Love this verb. It's down here, but it's too small to see there. So this verb, great principal parts tolo, tolere, and you're thinking, okay, so makes sense. T-O-L-L is the stem. Oh no, look at this one. Sustuli. What happened? And then sublatus. Okay, so clearly what's happened here is two different verbs have been combined and are now just one verb. Whatever the principal parts of tolo originally were, people stopped using it in the perfect. And whatever the principal parts of sustuli and sublatus were, people stopped using that and used tolo in the present, imperfect, and future. And these two guys, clearly, we've got a prefix, sub, and tuli and latus clearly come from pharaoh, fere, tuli, latus, which in itself is one of those hybrid verbs. Pharaoh and fere, fer stem, that was one verb originally. Tul, well, that's something altogether different, which perhaps we're looking at in tolo, tul, tol, and latus comes from some completely other verb. It all gets smushed together over time through usage.